Merry Christmas. Good to have you, sir. How have you been?
Good. I'm here headed to Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, you are a busy little man today, riding all over the state.
Yeah, I'm growing in office. I've gained about 10 pounds since Thanksgiving.
Listen, I'm glad that I hated you couldn't come by the office. I'll be sure and drink up a cup of cocoa for you. But
Please.
Now tell me about the non-stopping, never ceasing monster that is creeping out of monitors all across the country called healthcare.gov.
Well, Obamacare basically sucks. It is not working. The website is a mess, but, I don't know if you heard today that they're going to reimburse insurance companies.
We're going to do...
without any verification.
We're going to do an entire segment on that because I've been reading about that for about 2 days now, and I think I've finally wrapped my head around what the government wants us to believe. So I've got that all covered up later today in the program. We can move on to some more pressing issues that you have in mind.
Senator Graham, when last you were here, you were talking to us in the studio about what was about to become the CBS 60-minute special. And then from there, you were blocking the appointments until you could get eyewitnesses to testify before Congress. And I think if I remember right, you got one. And then
I did.
And then Obama, flipped the rules on you.
Changed the rules.
Yeah, flipped the rules. Him and Harry Reid flipped the rules on you. Is there any chance of you getting more eyewitnesses?
Absolutely. But it is kind of bizarre, isn't it? I mean, I finally talked to a guy that was there. He hadn't been there that long, but he lived through the attack, and it was eye-opening. I asked, did you ever say anything to suggest there was a protest? No, sir. I reported a terrorist attack from the very first minute. There was no protest. We were under siege. Gun trucks parked around the compound. We were basically at war. And some other things I'll talk about next week from that interview. But I've learned that there were 3 other folks that I need to talk to on the ground that night. And basically what I'm trying to establish is what was the security footprint like? How many people did you tell that you didn't have adequate security? How often did you tell them, and what did they say? And did you suggest to anybody that there was a protest caused by video that led to the attack? And if you didn't suggest it, where did it come from? So it was an eye-opening experience. We've got a couple more people I want to talk to. The leverage I had before by holding nominees has been somewhat diminished, but I'm confident that I will get to talk to these folks because the Accountability Review Board, an internal investigation by the State Department, they were able to talk to these witnesses, and I'm confident I will be over time.
But do you think that Harry Reid and Barack Obama did what they call as the nuclear option specifically because of what you were doing?
No, I don't think so. I just think it's a power grab. Again, what they did really has made the Senate more like the House. For 200 years, senators had the ability to slow down and have a say about appointments, advice and consent. For it to mean anything, it's for people to listen to you, right? Mm-hmm. And under this new rules change, advice and consent has been basically washed away. All the judges below the Supreme Court can now be confirmed by a majority vote, which makes the picks more ideological. Mm-hmm. If you had to reach across the party lines to get people confirmed, you get a little more sensible pick.
And we've been told that it's the Washington District Court. That's the D.C. District Court is what he's specifically trying to get judges put into to help his cases.
Yes, this is the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals is the court that hears all the appeals when there's a suit involving a government agency. So you wanted to sue the IRS over Obamacare, or you wanted to bring a lawsuit against the EPA or any government agency, the appeal of that decision would go to the D.C. Circuit Court. Every president tries to pack that court because it's one way to protect your administration from lawsuits, but no president has ever pushed the Senate to change the rules. This president did. So any lawsuits involving the implementation of Obamacare when it comes to rules and regulations will go to the D.C. Circuit Court, and I think that was a big motivator in terms of changing the rules.
It's amazing, and you're right. Just talking about what you inferred to a few minutes ago about the problems now with people on the backside of the healthcare.gov. We're hearing more and more from insurance companies who are not able to ascertain the information in printed English. It's some kind of godly goop that's coming out on the other side for persons who think they have actually gained health care insurance. So if they do not know that their health care is not in fact enforced because the company did not receive information that was legible from the computer printout, then if they are involved in an accident or some kind of illness after the 1st of January, you would think that because they went through healthcare.gov, they would have an opportunity to seek some kind of remedy through federal government, and although they may, but if you have to state your case to that court in order to be able to sue the government, now you got a big problem.
Well, again, Bush tried to put a new panel on the court. Every case involving the government is appealed to that court. And it's always been a prize for any president to want to have influence on that court, but nobody's changed the rules, so it was a power grab. But here's what I would like to see from your listeners here. When this thing is finally up and running, if it ever gets up and running, how many people's insurance premiums have gone down? And how many have gone up? Let me tell you what I've decided to do. I'm going to enroll in the state exchange, not the D.C. exchange. As a member of the Senate, I'm on the federal health care plan, the FEHB, I think is what it's called. But we have to go into the exchanges. Members of Congress and their staff can enroll in the D.C. exchange, and we're eligible for a 75% subsidy, which I don't think any member of Congress should get that deal because, if we're going to push this on everybody else, we should live like everybody else. So what I'm going to do is enroll in the state exchange and pick a plan. And from my initial inquiry about what's available for me as a 58-year-old short white guy, my premiums are going to go up $400 a month at the minimum, and my coverage is going to be a fraction of what it used to be. And I guarantee you that's going to happen all over South Carolina.
Yeah, we're hearing nightmare stories from people whose premiums have gone up. That's the first noticeable difference in their cash flow for their budget. Then, as the year progresses, their out-of-pocket has tripled in some cases, and their copays to their doctor, and depending on if you're going to go to the doctor, a specialist, or an emergency room, their copays are going up as well. So we literally are talking to people making $30,000 a year who are taking on a $20,000 a year burden just to carry their insurance for themselves and their children.
Yeah, and let me tell you, they'll get a subsidy, but it's still going to be a pretty good lick for that family. But folks that make over $47,000 as an individual, families that make over $94,000, and I know that's a lot of money. But when you're sending kids to college and paying mortgage payments, people in that area, in that income area, their coverage, their costs are going to go through the roof. There are three things about Obamacare that you need to really question. You're going to get more, but you'll pay less. How many times does that happen? Everybody in the country will be covered, an additional 30, 40 million people, with a subsidy for most, but it won't affect you. We're going to require every business in America to rewrite their coverage, offer more coverage, but it won't affect job creation. Those three things make no sense.
Senator Graham, we're going to talk in a moment about the I know you weren't in this, this was a House thing yesterday, but maybe you had a chance to hear the testimony yesterday of Jonathan Turley. And that's made some small headlines today.
I saw it on Fox last night.
Yeah, it hasn't made big headlines today, but he was testifying, and it sounded like to me he believes Congress has the authority and should be attempting to try to impeach the president for abuse of power.
Yeah, I know Jonathan pretty well. I got to know him during the Clinton impeachment. I think what he was saying is that there's a line a president can cross in terms of rewriting laws and taking power from other branches of the government that would amount to a high crime and misdemeanor. I don't think he recommended impeachment, but he said that you're having an uber presidency here. But here's the problem. Remember the czars?
Yes.
Well, Bush started this. So one thing I want our folks to remember is we get the White House back and the Congress, House, and the Senate. I hope we'll go back to the basics. We'll spend less money, and we'll go back to a more constitutionally based system of government. But what Obama's doing with these waivers and rewriting the law is mind-boggling. Can you imagine Bush doing this? If Bush just arbitrarily waived a year of eligibility,
no.
We're not going to apply this for another year because of the election.
Jonathan Turley is a congressional scholar, for those of you who don't know, who's testified before Congress before,
right.
And
Very
he's also
smart guy.
he's a self-described socially liberal agenda type guy who used to go on MSNBC all the time calling out Bush, and he used to call out Bush for abuses of power and overstepping his authority, especially with Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
And so this guy's not somebody who's just a far right-wing kook. This guy.
Oh no, I've known Jonathan for years during Clinton's impeachment. I talked to him a lot. We were on a lot of shows together. He's a very smart guy. He's a Democrat, really.
Yeah, that's what he is.
He's a constitutional scholar.
Yeah, and like you were saying, he has now described the presidency as way beyond what it was supposed to have ever intended to be, and has become, like you said, a czar, and is creating a fourth branch of government, which is all of these, bloated agencies like the IRS and stuff.
Yeah, I just really think in 2014, the election's going to be about something big. What is the proper role of the federal government? Is Obamacare really where the country needs to be going? The differences between the parties is probably best explained in Obamacare. Republicans need to come up with a plan of our own that's more private sector based. But what Obama's tried to do is basically squeeze out the business community from offering health care, herd everybody into these exchanges with federal government subsidies. And you see what happens when the government takes over like they're trying to take over in Obamacare. Quality is going to go down, cost is going to go up, individual choice is going to be less. And I think the 2014 and the 2016 elections are going to be about issues like this, reining back in power.
Well, and to Jonathan Turley's point last night, because I saw the same interview, but also something you mentioned it again a moment ago about the growth of these agencies where they can actually nearly draw their own jurisdiction. When you get the FBI, who will not turn over documents about an investigation they supposedly did into the IRS, and they refuse to turn that over to a Senate or a House subcommittee, we know that then it's going to have to go to that. Would it have to go to the court in order for a holder to have to be forced to let that information be released?
Well,
so now we're back to packing the court.
Well, this is a good question. You could sue, Congress could sue, and they could claim executive privilege or, an ongoing criminal investigation. There's always a dance between the executive branch and the legislative branch. The founders created tension on purpose. They created tension and checks and balances. And as federal agencies can implement and pass regulations that have the same force of a law without control, that really is scary, because a government rule or regulation can put you in jail just as quick as a statute passed by the Congress and signed by the president.
Right.
I think it's the great challenge of the 21st century is to find a mechanism to make sure that unelected bureaucrats who have the authority to impose rules and regulations on business and individuals have more accountability. Because if you don't like what I'm doing, you can vote me in or vote me out. If you like, I'm accountable to the people through the ballot box. This whole branch of government, the IRS and other federal agencies that have rulemaking power, basically have no checks and balances. They're not accountable through the electoral process. And the only thing you have left is the courts. And that's why this court packing is so dangerous.
Well, we got to fix it because most Americans now agree we're not heading in the right direction. So we got to fix it.
And we're not. I mean, the world is becoming more dangerous. We'll talk about the Iranian nuclear program. This is a mistake for the ages in the making. The Obama administration is really, I wouldn't let these guys buy me a car. The deal they're trying to cut with the Iranians,
Wow.
the Israelis will never live with. But the bottom line is I've introduced legislation to allow each state to opt out of Obamacare if they would like. President Obama has given all of his friends, the unions, and all his political buddies waivers or exempted them from the law. You know, the executive branch is exempt from Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't we give that same ability to each individual state? And if South Carolinians want to do health care a different way, allow us to opt out. So I've introduced that legislation. I think it would be fascinating to see how members of the House and Senate would vote on the idea of letting their own state decide what to do.
Well, keep us up to date on that, Senator. We have to move on, but thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank
Merry
you,
Christmas.
sir.